The next member to testify is our good friend, Mr. Ellers. Welcome. We're pleased to receive your testimony. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And I have a complete prepared statement, which I will submit for the record, but in the interest of time,
Without objection.
I will certainly reduce it. It does take a bit of time because it's a very complex situation. And I happen to know how strongly you feel about education from your years of work in your home state, but also your interest in math and science education, and that's an important part of this. But so is math and science research. And what complicates the situation was the omnibus appropriations bill we passed last year. I personally think omnibus appropriations bills are an abomination. I voted against it because I've seen what they've done in the past. And precisely the same thing happened this year. They totally devastated the scientific research budget as well as the math and science education budget, simply because, frankly, there's not a great number of people supporting these items. And it was very easy for the appropriator to just take that money and move it into other things. So we have a situation this year where the president has tried to request a reasonable amount, but at the very least, I think we should make up what we lost in the omnibus bill, which amounts to roughly $800 million in function 250. And if you can also compare that to the America Competes Act, which the Congress passed last year, which I think is a marvelous step forward in helping us compete with other countries and to get back on track, we actually need an increase of approximately $1 billion. In addition to that, in function 370, we need some makeup as well. So my plea really, in very simple form, is to take the president's request with a grain of salt and say, look, we have to do that, plus we have to make up for what was taken out of those accounts last year. I recall several years ago when the appropriators did the same thing on a previous omnibus bill, and we lost a considerable amount of money in math and science, and that money was gone forever because the following year it was removed from the base, and we never made it up. And I think this is a case where we should set an example and make up the difference of what we took away last year, plus put them back on the doubling track, which we have in America Competes Act. It's a very modest doubling track compared to what we did with NIH a few years ago. And clearly, the National Science Foundation, National Institute of Standards and Technology, and the Department of Energy all deserve to be made whole once again. We are in a situation where we literally have broken international agreements by failing to fund some of the elements of the Department of Energy Office of Science, where, for example, the ITER project, which is going to be housed in France, but as we're working on it with a combination of nations, we have basically taken out our commitment to that, and we are altering foreign policy through appropriations. I don't think that was ever intended, and we certainly have to correct that. So, and rather than take a lot of your time, Mr. Chairman, because I know you personally are in agreement with this, our plea is to make up what was taken away last year by the omnibus, as well as provide the normal increase this year that the president has requested. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I would say no one has any question, my good friend, other than to say thank you for your commitment to this, because there's no question that for America to continue to compete in this global economy, it is critical that we have additional resources in math and science.
Yeah, and I can give all the standard arguments. So just yesterday, someone was telling me once again that China is now producing more English-speaking engineers than the United States is, and that is true. And that's just one little item, but there's just a host of different issues. And frankly, we're losing out in international competition because we are not taking account of these things. We're not pushing either our math and science education or our math and science research efforts, and we have to do that if we're going to keep up this international competition. We've always assumed we're ahead, and we have been. Now we're falling behind, and we have to catch back up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I believe we lost. Our next member to testify is Ms. Carolyn Shea Porter. Welcome. We're pleased to receive your testimony. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And without objection, your full statement will be entered into the record.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to speak about some of the essential needs in my own state and to speak a bit about the President's budget and where I believe we have gone wrong. The President's proposed budget for fiscal year 2009 reflects a very real difference between the administration's priorities and the priorities of this Congress and the American people. Over the past 7 years, we've seen record budget deficits, to problems and cuts in programs to programs like the National Institutes of Health and the Centers for Disease Control, a reckless plan to privatize Social Security, and a war in Iraq that has cost this country billions of dollars in money and eventually could cost more than $1 trillion. All of this without proper accountability. Now the administration has once again put forth a budget proposal that does not adequately reflect the needs of the country. There are so many problems with the President's budget, so many important programs that are underfunded, and so many misplaced priorities. While I take issue with many of the President's cuts, there is one that I feel is particularly troubling. Mr. Chairman, the LIHEAP program is one of the most crucial support structures for millions of people throughout this country. Every winter, tens of thousands of New Hampshire residents, over 40,000 each of the past 2 years, applied to our fuel assistance program for help with their heating bills. I don't need to tell you how cold it is in New Hampshire, and for low-income families how critical these programs are. The committed people who work in these programs are working day and night to help these families, but they need help. Even as the price of the oil has skyrocketed, the LIHEAP program continues to be chronically underfunded, putting a greater burden on American families. According to the Energy Information Administration, the average cost to heat a home with heating oil this winter is expected to climb to over $2,000 per family, more than 3 times the $627 that it cost 6 years ago. Meanwhile, the benefit that LIHEAP provides has not only failed to keep pace with this dramatic increase in costs, it's actually dropped. In 2006, the New Hampshire Fuel Assistance Program was able to provide an average benefit of $638 per applicant. In 2007, it dropped to $533. In 2008, the average benefit might be slightly higher than last year, thanks to Congress' work to increase funding for this program, but it will in no way make up the difference in the increase in oil prices. For fiscal year 2009, the President has proposed a funding level of $2 billion to LIHEAP, $1.7 billion for the grants to states, and $300 million for the emergency contingency funding. This represents a $570 million reduction in funding from what Congress provided in 2006. This irresponsible cut in funding will mean that New Hampshire would stand to lose over $2.5 million in funding. Mr. Chairman, we cannot allow this to happen. As you begin work on the fiscal year 2009 budget resolution, I urge you to include a robust funding level for LIHEAP program. Too many people in my state and across the country rely on LIHEAP to keep their heat on. In this great nation, no family should have to choose between keeping warm or buying groceries. It's just wrong, and Congress has a chance to correct this. Again, there are many other areas in the President's budget that concern me, but as a member of the Armed Services Committee, there's one that I find particularly troubling. In the President's fiscal year 2009 budget proposal, the administration estimates savings of over $1 billion next year in the TRICARE program. I have raised questions with Secretary Gates on how exactly the Defense Department is projecting savings in their health care programs when the cost of providing this care continues to rise. I've also questioned their assertions that family members and service members will opt out of TRICARE and move towards employer-based coverage, when the reality is that fewer employers even offer health insurance. I'm also deeply disturbed by the continuing increases in co-payments, enrollment fees, and deductibles that the administration is recommending be imposed on our military families. There are many areas in which the government should be trying to reduce costs, but military health care is not a place to cut. In my capacity as a member of the Armed Services Committee, I will continue to investigate the Defense Department's projected savings, and I will fight to ensure that our military families are not saddled with higher costs for their health care. I believe the President and the administration is playing a shell game with military health care costs, shifting costs to our military personnel and projecting savings that cannot materialize. I urge the committee to also pay close attention to the administration's projections in this area and to take whatever steps are necessary to address these inequities. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity to appear here. I look forward to working with all of you to pass a strong budget resolution that reflects the priorities of our Congress and the American people. Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady for her testimony, and the full statement will be entered into the record.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next member to testify is the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt. Welcome. We're pleased to receive your testimony. Without objection, your full statement will be entered into the record. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do have a longer statement that, for the record. I'm here to talk about the importance of investment in science education, research and development, essentially Function 250 as well as related areas in education. Norm Augustine, one of the lead authors of the National Academy's report, Rising Above the Gathering Storm, said that, quote, while scientists and engineers represent only 4% of the U.S. workforce, their productivity creates jobs for 96% of the population. We're going to see increasingly the need for stimulus packages if we don't invest in basic science. We are not rising above the gathering storm, end quote. Now, there's no denying that America is losing ground in global competitiveness to countries that are making necessary investments in education and research and development. We should remind ourselves and never forget that we owe our current economic strength and our national security and our quality of life to investments of past generations, investments that the federal government and the private sector, but in many cases even that with lead from the federal government, have made in education, in research and development, and in innovation. And investment in these areas ensures that the American people will continue to benefit from the opportunities of a rapidly growing economy. These are not just words. This is an alarm. You are hearing about many important things today: housing, assistance in heating for homes of people of low means, transportation, environmental protection, and on and on. But you must take action in this area. What is the period of projections for this year's budget resolution? I suppose it'll be based on a 10-year projection. If you want to be able to fund, if we as a nation or we as a Congress want to be able to fund the work in housing, in transportation, in environmental protection, in low-income heating assistance, and on, we had better pay heed to the investment that is long overdue in research and development. The Federal Reserve announced at the beginning of February that they reduced their forecast for growth for 2008 to an anemic 1.3 to 2%, that joblessness is likely to climb 0.4% to over 5%. Science R&D is not just another interest group. If we're going to do right by our constituents, we must increase dramatically our investment in R&D and, not incidentally, take steps in the tax code and in other ways to encourage R&D in the private sector. In August of last year, the House passed into law a comprehensive competitiveness package that was known as America Competes. And it was motivated by disturbing findings of the Rising Above the Gathering Storm report, that our nation is drastically underinvesting in engineering and physical sciences. The bill authorized doubling the funding for the Department of Energy, the Office of Science in the department, for the National Science Foundation. This is not asking too much. It would be a modest response to a large problem. As I said a few moments ago, we will pass stimulus package after stimulus package in the future if we don't make these investments now. Unfortunately, the fiscal year 2008 budget fell far short of this goal. NSF received a 2.5% increase, far short of the 8 to 10% increase that was provided in the earlier versions of the appropriations bills, and DOE's Office of Science didn't fare much better. Without taking a drastically different approach, in this cycle, Congress will be delivering a devastating blow to future economic security and competitiveness.
I thank the gentleman, and thank you for your commitment to the future of this country, because science is really where it is. Thank you.
I thank the chairman. I thank the committee.
Thank you, sir. The next member to testify is the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Sutton. Welcome. We're pleased to receive your testimony. You're recognized for 5 minutes, and without objection, your full statement will be entered into the record.
Oh, see, I should know how to turn on the microphone. The budget is a moral document. It's a statement of the values of our nation. It's the clearest way to see where a government's true priorities lie. That's why I'm very concerned about the message that the President's budget sends to the American people. It does not invest in the most important long-term priorities in the country. It instead places a premium on investment in the short-term interests of a few. At a time when working families are facing skyrocketing energy, healthcare, and education costs, the President's budget would cut critical programs that can help Americans through these tough economic times. Today, I would like to discuss a few of those programs which are vital to the people I represent in Ohio. First, infrastructure. The state of the nation's crumbling infrastructure was demonstrated in the most dramatic fashion possible when the I-35 bridge in Minneapolis collapsed into the Mississippi River last August. In the face of overwhelming evidence of the need for increased investment in our infrastructure, the Bush administration continues nonetheless to pursue an open-ended policy in Iraq while badly shortchanging infrastructure investments at home. Tackling the repair of our nation's infrastructure is not a glamorous task, but it is absolutely essential for our nation's long-term success. The Minnesota bridge collapse and Hurricane Katrina are vivid reminders that these considerations are not theoretical. Investments in infrastructure are not just critical for public safety, but they also bring a significant boost to local economies and provide more Americans with good-paying jobs. The President's proposed funding levels are fully $1 billion below the levels guaranteed by Safety Lou. The Budget Committee should reject this funding level and renew our commitment to improving our national infrastructure. Second, first responders. I would also urge the Budget Committee to reject the cuts the President has made to grants to local law enforcement and fire departments. Although the President has repeatedly stressed the importance of Homeland Security, he's left our first responders without funds that they are critically important to the work that they do in our communities every single day. Firefighters in my district depend on assistance to firefighter grants, which are used for equipment, training, and other projects to ensure they have everything they need to keep our families and neighborhoods safe. The President's proposed funding levels would eliminate over $24 million in fire grants for the state of Ohio, which would result in 267 fewer grants awarded. He also eliminated formula funding for the Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant grants, which would result in 122 fewer police officers funded in Ohio. Our first responders are out in the communities every day and have made a commitment to protecting our communities from harm. We in Congress must also make that commitment to our first responders to ensure that they have the resources they need to continue their critical work. Research and development. In order for the United States to continue at the forefront of innovation and technology, we must continue to support research and development. That these investments generate significant returns is abundantly clear, and not only will they result in advances in our scientific understanding, they generate new jobs and help fuel our local economies. The University of Akron, for example, is a world leader in polymer research, and the effect this research center has had on Akron's economy has been profound. I encourage the committee to include robust funding for research and development in this year's budget. Green jobs. In addition, this year we have the opportunity to fund a newly authorized program that will help reinvest in American manufacturing, such as at the Avon Lake Ford plant in my district, and help create green jobs. This past December, we authorized the Advanced Technology Vehicles Manufacturing Incentive Program, which will be administered by the Department of Energy. This program will provide low-cost loans to automobile manufacturers to make substantial investments in their factories here in the United States. By funding this program, auto companies will have low-interest loans available to invest in engineering, component production, and retooling of existing factories to manufacture new advanced technology vehicles such as hybrids, plug-in hybrids, advanced diesel, and fuel cell cars. And finally, our veterans. We must always remember that the full measure of what we owe our veterans does not end after they leave the battlefield. Our responsibility extends to what we provide for our soldiers once they return home. The President's budget does not provide adequately for the care of our veterans, providing $20 billion less than what is necessary to merely maintain its current purchasing power. It is unacceptable for the President to attempt to impose new fees on our veterans, even though they have been overwhelmingly rejected many times before. I am proud to say that I served on this committee when we passed the largest increase in VA funding in American history. I urge the Budget Committee to continue its commitment to helping those who have fought so bravely and sacrificed in ways that so many of us can never fully appreciate. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it very much. The next member to testify is the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis. Let me welcome you. We're pleased to receive your testimony. You're recognized for 5 minutes, and without objection, your full testimony will be entered into the record.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify on the President's 09 budget. I've written testimony that has been submitted along with recommendations for an alternative budget to the committee, and today would like to speak about two issues that I think reveal a dysfunctional budget that not only increases the deficit but also robs Peter to pay Paul. Indeed, amidst a climate of record decreases in hourly wages, job loss, prolonged unemployment, foreclosures, and high fuel prices, the administration's FY09 budget proposal fails to meet head-on socioeconomic trends and foremost the humanitarian needs of U.S. citizens. For example, within the Department of Labor, the President proposes to consolidate workforce investment, WIA, adult dislocated workers and youth employment services programs, work opportunity tax credits, and workforce information electronic tools system building into a single funding stream to states for career advancement accounts towards the attainment of self-directed accounts, whereby individuals receive $6,000 over a 2-year period. Under the auspices of streamlining and creating efficiency, there is a funding reduction of over $300 million compared to FY 2008's combined current law program totals. In today's economic climate, these monies are best served under current programs and will provide skills and training vital to securing substantial employment and foremost medical coverage. This pattern continues with the merging of WIA's Prisoner Reentry Initiative, PRI, and Responsible Reintegration for Young Offenders, funding into WIA's reintegration of ex-offenders, a single consolidated program for adult and juvenile ex-offenders. However, unlike the aforementioned consolidation, PRI grant funds will be completed in FY 209, and there will be no ROYO activity in FY 209. At the same time, the administration has reduced WIA reintegration of ex-offenders 2009 funding by 50%, down to $39,600,000 from FY 2008's $73,493,000. Collectively, these cuts strike the hearts of communities across America, particularly faith and community-based service providers who've historically and continue to be on the front line provided much-needed wraparound service. Struggling state and local governments will continue to bear the cost of reducing recidivism and creating safer communities. Moreover, faith in community-based reentry programs' ability to provide much-needed jobs will be substantially diminished. In the area of Medicare and Medicaid, I oppose the administration's $195 billion cut in services over 5 years because it threatens to endanger 1.6 million Medicare and 1.9 million Medicaid patients in Illinois alone. And while Congress has placed a one-year moratorium on Rule 2261, redefining Medicaid reimbursable rehabilitative services, and a rule disallowing Medicaid payments to public hospitals from graduate medical education, it's important to note that the collective outcome of proposed budget cuts and pending moratoriums will be devastating. If the moratorium is not extended, the public hospital proposed rule will go into effect on May 25, 2008, and the GME rule will go into effect sometimes this summer. Again, Mr. Chairman, I think that these will have devastating impacts on the ability of large numbers of individuals to receive health and medical care throughout America, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify and look forward to the revamping of this budget.
Thank the gentleman for his testimony, and there's no question about his commitment to those among us who have the greatest need. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next member to testify is a gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney. Welcome. We're pleased to have your testimony. You're recognized for 5 minutes, and your full statement will be entered into the record without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your interest and particularly your endurance. I will do my best to summarize the written statement which we've submitted for the record. We've heard a lot already just in the last few witnesses about the shortcomings of this budget in terms of dealing with domestic needs. I'd like to shift gears for a moment and talk about the impact of this budget on the continuing decline of America's United States Navy. When George Bush was sworn into office in 2001, the United States Navy numbered 341 multi-mission battle force ships. Today, the fleet is at a 91-year low of 279 ships, 34 ships below the Navy's own requirements. I want to repeat that point. Today, we have a maritime strategy in this country to have a Navy of 313 ships, and today we are at 279. The President's budget, which was submitted earlier in January, once again continues the outrageous decline of the size of our fleet with a submission of only 7 new ships. If you take the average shelf life of a ship or submarine of 30 years and do the math, the President's budget will continue, again, the steady decline in terms of the size of our fleet size. This is at a time when 95% of goods being imported to the United States come by sea, and also it's at the same time in which there are new maritime forces that are growing. The New York Times earlier this week, on Monday, had a story about the fact that the Chinese Navy now is in full active programs to build up its nuclear navy. By the end of this decade, they will have more submarines than the United States Navy, and the trajectory in terms of what they're doing in terms of the buildup indicates that really we really have no clear picture in terms of how large the buildup will be. To put this in perspective, Mr. Chairman, when Ronald Reagan left office, we had a 600-ship Navy in this country. In my district, Groton, Connecticut, we were building 5 submarines a year. We've been limping along at 1 submarine a year for the last 15 years. And a chart is attached to my testimony which shows the fact that the present size of the submarine fleet will continue to exist only because of the legacy submarines that were built back in the 1980s. We are going to dip below the Navy's finding of the minimum that's necessary, a 48-ship submarine fleet, and it will stay there for a period of almost 12 to 15 years. Again, at exactly the same time when a new maritime force is gathering steam in the People's Republic of China. It probably sounds almost counterintuitive, given the fact that our defense budget now is almost $750 billion, that something like this is happening. But frankly, it shows that the war in Iraq is not only siphoning off resources for domestic needs in this country, but major weapons systems, particularly the Air Force and the Navy, is suffering as well. Last Congress, the Democratic-led Congress, actually, for the first time in 15 years, addressed this problem partially by having an advanced procurement towards a second submarine to start beginning to at least mitigate the decline of our fleet. And I frankly think it shows that Mr. Spratt, Mr. Skelton, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Murtha understand the fact that this country has huge challenges facing us that, again, the budget priorities of this administration has neglected over the last 7 years. Again, my statement also goes into some of the other key issues in terms of the state of Connecticut that this budget falls far short. Just one brief mention is just in the area of education underfunding. The No Child Left Behind Act is $85 billion behind the curve. School districts that rely on antiquated property taxes are totally overwhelmed in terms of mandated costs coming from Washington. And once again, we get another budget which just continues to add to that burden and is, I have hopefully a lot of confidence that Mr. Spratt and the committee is going to, again, begin the work that we started last year to redirect the priorities of this country to face challenges that we face both abroad and at home. And I thank you for your, again, your patience and interest.
I thank the gentleman from Connecticut and for his commitment to not only of his people in Connecticut, but the people of America. Thank you for your testimony. The next member we will recognize for testimony is the gentlelady from Hawaii, Ms. Hanoya, and welcome. We're pleased to receive your testimony. You're recognized for 5 minutes, and without objection, your full statement will be entered into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful for this opportunity to provide my input as you work to prepare the budget resolution for fiscal year 2009. I am deeply concerned about the many cuts to vital programs proposed in President Bush's budget, including those affecting veterans, Medicare, Medicaid, Homeland Security, medical research, education, environmental programs, and so much more. In fact, given all of the problems with the President's budget, one hardly knows where to begin or end. I've decided to focus my remarks on some of the proposed cuts that, if sustained, would severely impact the economies of my state and yours. I'm deeply concerned about the effect the current economic downturn will have in my district and want to be sure that the investment we made by passing the economic stimulus package is not undermined by underfunding critical federal programs. I represent Hawaii's 2nd District, which is comprised of 7 inhabited islands. Most of my district is rural. Many of the challenges facing my district are unique because it is spread over many islands and is so remote from the mainland U.S. However, I know that we share many of the concerns of rural communities throughout the country. I ask that the committee ensure that vital federal programs that help support economic development in our communities are maintained at the FY 208 purchasing levels in fiscal year 2009. Since the release of the President's budget, I have heard from many nonprofit groups in Hawaii that rely on these federal funds to leverage their ability to raise additional funds for economic development, job training, job creation, and other vital programs to move our economy forward. They are deeply worried about the proposed cuts. The following are among the most important programs for localities in my district. First, Community Development Block Grant Program, CDBG. The President's budget cut CDBG by almost 20% of what would be needed to maintain 2008 purchasing power. CDBG funds are highly valued by the counties in my district because these funds provide flexibility for local governments to respond to local problems, whether in providing affordable housing, economic development, job creation, or meeting other critical needs. We should be increasing, not decreasing, this assistance. The proposed cut would cost my state some $2.8 million at a very difficult time. Second, surface transportation funding. The President's proposed cuts in transportation funding below the levels authorized by Congress is the wrong move at a time when we need to be investing in building and repairing our nation's vital transportation infrastructure. These projects would provide jobs during this economic downturn and ensure our future economic competitiveness. The proposed cuts would cost my state an estimated $2.5 million in 2009. Third, Clean Water State Revolving Fund and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds. The President's budget provides the lowest level of funding ever, measured in terms of purchasing power for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Our states and local communities rely on these programs to upgrade and replace our aging wastewater collection and treatment systems and to ensure safe drinking water for all of our communities. These funds ensure the health and safety of our citizens and provide needed jobs. Fourth, job training. We must help our citizens adjust to changing demands in our economy and ensure that we have a well-trained workforce. Please reject the President's proposal to cut funding for job training by $1.1 billion compared with the level provided in 2008. Fifth, crime prevention. The President's budget estimates several law enforcement programs created by Congress that assist state and local governments in combating crime, including the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Program, the Byrne Discretionary Grants, drug courts, and the Community-Oriented Policing Services, COPS program. Please reject these eliminations and restore funding to these proven programs. Last but not least, Social Services Block Grant, SSBG. Please reject the President's proposal to cut SSBG funding by almost 30%. This grant gives states the discretion to provide social services such as child care, child welfare, home-based services, employment services, services for the disabled, depending on needs in each state. Many working families cannot get by without the support these programs provide. The President's proposed cuts would cost Hawaii some $2.1 million in 2009. This list of programs is just a sampling of the many successful and bad programs that Congress has created and supported over the years to help our communities and to encourage economic development. I ask the committee build on the excellent work it accomplished last year and reject the President's proposed cuts. Finally, I ask that the committee reject the proposed cuts to educational, health, and housing programs benefiting Native Hawaiians. As one of only 2 members in the House representing Hawaii, I ask that you support continued funding for these authorized and long-standing programs for our indigenous peoples, the Native Hawaiians. Mahalo and aloha for listening to my concerns.
I thank the gentlelady for her testimony, for her great advocacy for not only for her state, but for the needs of this country. The next member to testify will be the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Rodriguez. Welcome. We're pleased to receive your testimony. You're recognized for 5 minutes, and without objection, your full statement will be entered into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to begin by telling you a little bit about my district. It's a 23rd Congressional District of Texas. The district is one of the largest in the country. It spans 785 miles on the border with Mexico. I also represent the south and northwest sides of San Antonio. My district is also both very urban in San Antonio and very rural in West Texas. We have farming, ranching, and we have the state of the art when it comes to the military and biotech research. Just like the district and its diversity, the needs are also extremely diverse. As you well know, the President released his budget request earlier this month. The budget does not reflect the many priorities and the needs of my constituency, and that I hope that this committee, with its leadership, will be able to address some of these needs. And I will provide you with a blueprint of some of the concerns that we have. First of all, as it relates to the base realignment and closure, as referred to as the BRAC, one of the main number one problems that we might have is that the military installations in San Antonio are expected to bring precedents of economic boom as a result of this particular effort. San Antonio will provide much of the health care as well as the medical training for the entire Department of Defense as a result of BRAC. Any delays or underfunding can increase the future of this construction cost. I respectfully ask the committee not only to provide the funding for the BRAC, which is essential, and the recommendations, but also provide legislative language to prioritize any BRAC considerations related to defense and health care programs. I believe that the language will allow the military to be able to prepare to provide not only the training, but the adequate health care needs of our soldiers through the BRAC process. So I'd ask for those serious considerations. Secondly, the U.S. border, the Mexico border program at the Environmental Protection Agency funds the Project Development Assistance Program and the Border Environmental Infrastructure Fund. The President requests the funding levels of $10 million for 2009. that would lead to fulfilling only 5% of the program's needs. This program has received as much as $100 million in annual appropriations, and to be cut to $10 million is a drastic cut. The President, over the last 2 years, has requested only $10 million for this program. Many small, rural, and low-income communities rely on the program like this to provide the most basic necessities, such as water and wastewater infrastructure along the border. I strongly urge the committee's recommendation of $100 million for EPA U.S.-Mexico border program. Thirdly, recent routine safety inspections found that 4 dams operated and maintained by the IBWC were all found to be unsafe. The IBWC does not believe that they're in immediate danger, but continue to neglect will lead to disrepair and danger in these particular areas. The IBWC has estimated that the U.S. cost to rehabilitate these dams' infrastructure is $30 million. The largest and most need of repair is the Amistad Dam. The water reservoir created by the dam is the Amistad National Recreation Area. This unit of the National Park System hosts over 1 million tourists each year. This dam is located on the Mexican-U.S. border. And this year, the President requested only $1 million for the dam rehabilitation at the IBWC. This $1 million is barely enough to maintain the brand-new dams and nowhere near the needs for rehabilitating those that are in danger. I significantly request that the committee maintain and for this infrastructure, and that we request the committee recommend a $30 million for the IBWC construction account. And fourthly, the Southwest Border Prosecution Initiative and the State Criminal Alien Assistance Program reimbursement for states and counties and other jurisdictions for costs incurred for undertaking a federal responsibility, such as prosecuting federal cases or incarceration of federal crimes with aliens. The Southwest Border Prosecuting Initiative was funded at $30 million in 2008 and a $10 million cut from the 2007, and is authorized at $750 million for 2006 and $850 million for 2007, and $950 million for 2008. But in 2008, it only received $410 million, almost a cut of a half of its resources. The reimbursement that is received is also a fraction of the cost that is needed in order to make this happen. I request the committee recommend $50 million above the initial request and a $950 million in order for us to continue to move forward on the prosecution initiatives. And finally, an issue that I wanted to share with you, the animal plant health inspection services that are important. I respectfully ask the request that the committee consider $12 million for the cattle fever tick eradication program. It's a real serious program that we have on the border with Mexico, and fever ticks do domestic damage in our area, so I ask for your support in the area, and I want to thank you personally for allowing me this opportunity to testify before your committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman for his testimony. Appreciate your time. The next member to testify is a gentleman from California, Mr. Honda. Welcome. And we're pleased to receive your testimony. You're recognized for 5 minutes, and without objection, your full statement will be entered into the record.
Mr. Chairman, members of the House Budget Committee, thank you for this opportunity to express my views on what I believe should be key priorities in the fiscal year 2009 federal budget. As a former member of this distinguished committee, it is a great pleasure to speak before you today. Mr. Chairman, as a former teacher and principal, promoting quality education continues to be one of my top priorities here in Congress. I voted in favor of the No Child Left Behind with great trepidation. While I support setting higher standards for our nation's schools, I feared that without the necessary resources, the legislation would impose unfunded mandates on our schools, teachers, and our students. Unfortunately, that fear has come true. Today, I hear from countless numbers of teachers, principals, and school board members who are struggling with the mandates set out by the No Child Left Behind Act while facing severe budgetary cuts. In Santa Clara County, there are teachers who have only been given one box of paper for their students for the entire year. There are teachers who do not have access to copy machines anymore because the schools have shut them down. That is why I am disappointed in the President's budget request for fiscal year 2009 and why I believe we must provide greater resources for education than the President has suggested. President Bush's budget ignores inflation and increases in student enrollment by proposing to spend about the same amount as last year for the Department of Education. Providing a mere 1% increase in funding for No Child Left Behind is essentially a cut and leaves funding about $15 billion below the level authorized for 2009. In addition, the budget proposed to redirect a greater proportion of Title I funds to high schools. This redirection will translate into even less funding to support K-8 education. The administration once again proposes a $300 million voucher program for students in failing schools, this year called Pell Grants for Kids, to be paid for by eliminating existing programs such as vocational education, state grants, Native American, Native Hawaiian institutions, tribally controlled post-secondary career and technical institutions, education technology state grants, and even START, and dramatically cutting others, such as after-school programs and minority-serving institutions. In addition, the President's budget once again fails to fully fund the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. As the Budget Committee is aware, the federal government made a commitment to provide 40% of the cost of educating children with disabilities in 1975. Congress has failed to meet that commitment for over 29 years. This is simply unacceptable. That is why I'm here today to urge the committee to make education a top priority by fully funding IDEA and increasing funding for the No Child Left Behind Act. Mr. Chairman, I am also here today to oppose the President's attempt once again to eliminate the State Criminal Alien Assistance Program in this budget. SCAP reimburses state and local governments for the costs of incarcerating criminal aliens, and it is vital to border states such as California, which incarcerate a disproportionately high share of undocumented criminal aliens. In addition, the President's budget would eliminate several crucial programs that will affect the health and well-being of my constituents as well as the nation as a whole. For example, he proposes to eliminate the Urban Indian Health Program, which provides unique services for those Native Americans living outside of reservations as a result of federal relocation policies and the unfortunate socioeconomic realities that persist on reservations. The President's budget also proposes to eliminate the Title VII health professions programs. These programs aim to increase the diversity of our healthcare workforce as well as improve the quality of healthcare in low-income and racial and ethnic minority populations. In addition, the budget includes no direct funding for the drug court program and woefully underfunds many other important justice programs such as juvenile justice programs and prevention of violence against women. Drug courts are an effective and popular method for the judicial system, mental health, social service, and treatment communities to intervene and break the cycle of substance abuse, addiction, and crime. I am somewhat encouraged by the fact that the President has included some important funding increases for scientific research that will help our nation to maintain its competitive position in the global marketplace, which is critical to my Silicon Valley district. Unfortunately, he has once again chosen to rob Peter to pay Paul by proposing to eliminate programs that have a proven track record of aiding small businesses and creating new jobs. He has not provided enough for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education to prepare the workforce we will need to remain competitive in the future. He has not provided the funding for NASA that will need to achieve the challenging exploration goals he has set for the agency while still performing its core science and aeronautics activities. As chairman of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, I would like to highlight 3 issues of importance to the Asian American Pacific Islander community in this year's budget. First, during World War II, Filipino soldiers fought under the flag of the United States to help our nation secure victory. These soldiers were denied veterans benefits that they were promised and that they earned, and it is my hope that this year the House and Senate will right that injustice by passing legislation to restore those benefits. I ask that the Budget Committee make room within the budget, as they did last year, within the budget resolution to accommodate this fix should legislation be passed. Second, the College Cost Reduction Act of 2007 created a new category of Asian American Pacific Islanders serving institutions of higher education. We ask that the Budget Committee provide for up to $25 million in funding for this newly designated class of institutions. Finally, in 2006, Congress passed legislation to preserve the internment camps where Japanese Americans were detained during World War II. The National Park Service has been developing a plan for the preservation of the sites, and $5 million is needed in the fiscal year 2009 budget to help make this happen. I understand that the Budget Committee is being asked to make these funding decisions in the context of a deficit. However, the federal government has an obligation to invest in future growth. Our nation's historical commitment to education, healthcare, and innovation and competitiveness has well served us well. And we must reaffirm that commitment in the FY 2009 budget resolution. I respectfully ask the committee to fully fund IDEA and provide substantial increases for the No Child Left Behind Act, allocate sufficient funding for vital health programs, ensure that we can maintain our international competitiveness in science and innovation. I thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank the gentleman for his testimony. Thank you, sir. The next member to testify will be the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch. Welcome. We're pleased to receive your testimony. You're recognized for 5 minutes, and without objection, your full statement will be entered into the record.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Rather than make a traditional presentation dealing with the specifics of the President's budget, I'd like to use my time, if I could, to talk about its real-world impact on people that I represent in Vermont. They're Vermonters who will be directly affected by the decisions that we make in this budget. Scott West, Mr. Chairman, is a veteran of the National Guard. He lives in the town of Albany in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. He used to drive a truck for a living, and when he was deployed to Kuwait in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, he suffered severe injuries to his shoulder, back, and wrist. In May, the pain from his injuries got so bad he couldn't continue his job as a truck driver. 9 months ago, he filed his claim for increased disability compensation from the VA. As of today, he continues to wait for the VA to process paperwork and award him the benefits to which he's entitled. And his next hearing is not scheduled until April 15, which will be nearly a full year from when he filed his claim. He's run out of money, and his bills continue to mount. Last year, this committee made an unprecedented commitment to the care of our nation's veterans, budgeting the largest increase in the 77-year history of the VA, and a larger increase than the combined total of the 6 previous years in Congress, and good work. This increase is going to allow the VA to hire an additional 1,800 claim processors to help ensure that veterans like Scott will receive in a timely way the support they have earned. And I thank the committee and the leadership for its commitment there. Peter and Irma McShane, they live in Pownell, Vermont. Senior citizens live frugally on $1,452 per month. Yet on that limited amount of money, they're $22 too much to qualify for food stamps. So they have a tough time trying to make their family budget with coupons and shopping around for the best deals. But no amount of their thriftiness can make up for the dramatic increases in the cost of home heating oil. Purchasing enough heating oil last winter cost the McShanes over $1,500. That's over a month of what their total income is. As the cold weather began to hit Vermont last fall, Peter and Irma needed help, or they were not going to be able to afford to heat their home. They applied for fuel assistance through the state in November and received help through LIHEAP, the Low-Income Heating Assistance Program. That is an indispensable program to ensuring that Vermonters like the McShanes do not have to choose between heating and eating. And even as fuel prices have skyrocketed, tripling, as you know, since 2001, the Bush budget would cut LIHEAP by $367 million below the amount needed to maintain services at the current level. Vermont alone would lose $1.87 million when adjusted for inflation, and I strongly encourage the committee to restore and expand LIHEAP funding so that none of our neighbors already struggling to get by are put at risk when confronted with heating their homes next winter. Meanwhile, I'd like to share a letter I received from a couple of weeks ago from Margaret Kenny of Fletcher, Vermont, about health care and the rising premiums and the rising deductibles that raise the question of whether it's even practical to have insurance. She and her husband ran their own woodworking business for 13 years, often working 6 and 7 days a week. Each year, her health insurance cost more and provided less. Her deductibles have increased from $5,000 to $10,000, and now she's got, quote, insurance with a $25,000 deductible. And what she writes is this: this, to me, translates to no insurance. We actually avoid going to the doctor because we can't do that and afford the monthly premiums. We are seriously thinking about giving it up and going with no insurance. We're still in our 60s, still a few years away from Medicare, and it seems to be the wrong time in our lives to be without insurance. Now, we can't fix our nation's health care crisis through the federal budget alone. It's going to, of course, require comprehensive health care reform. But unfortunately, President Bush's proposed budget takes us exactly in the wrong direction, calling for $500 billion in cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. These cuts will force states to cut back on coverage and will further raise insurance premiums by exacerbating the cost shift. And I encourage the committee to reject these reckless cuts and to work to ensure that families like the Kennys can obtain coverage at an affordable price. I want to just tell a story about Chief Bossy, Anthony Bossy from the city of Rutland. They have seen a frightening increase in violent crime and drug abuse over the past year, and they've had multiple drug-related shootings in recent months. The scope of the problem can't be addressed by the limited resources available in the Rutland Police Department, and Chief Bossy relies on funding from federal sources to expand Rutland's law enforcement activities. And despite the proven record of the Byrne Grant Program in reducing crime in Vermont and across the country, the Bush budget would cut funding by $174 million below what is needed simply to maintain services at the current level, something that would translate in Vermont losing $435,000 or 13 police officer positions. And the city of Rutland is by no means alone in their need for additional resources to fight the very severe problem of illegal drugs. Towns in all corners of Vermont, Rutland, Barre, St. Albans, are experiencing similar issues. And finally, Mr. Chairman, Gretchen Austin Ward, a mother of 3 from Windsor, recently called my office to express her desperation, really, about the rising cost of college education. Already burdened by the debt of sending her first 2 kids through college, she simply, literally, cannot afford to send her 3rd child to college. And when we first began offering Pell Grants in the 1970s, they covered 77%, and I know you are extremely familiar with this, 77% of the average cost of a 4-year public institution. Today, it's 36%. We've taken some positive steps in Congress over the past year, cutting interest rates on Stafford loans, increasing the size of the Pell Grant. We made the largest commitment to college affordability since the GI Bill passed in 1944, but we've got to continue the effort and fund these programs. But at the same time, the federal government cannot simply write a blank check to our country's institutions. We do have to make sure that the higher education institutions help us on the cost side. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for the opportunity to convey these Vermont stories to you today. I look forward to working with you and the committee over the next several weeks to help craft the budget that's fiscally responsible, but absolutely reflects the needs and priorities of Vermonters and all Americans. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman for his testimony, and thank you for your commitment. And without objection, the committee stands in recess, subject to call of the chair.
Thanks, Bob. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Appreciate it. You look pretty good up there.
Not as good as John.
Was it something I said that everybody here? I'm just going to summarize.